Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Goman, and I'm the director of the Center for Free Enterprise, and I want to welcome all of you to our first event of the fall for the Menard Family Lecture Series. And we will have two more events this semester. One will be on October 24th at 4 o'clock in here in the auditorium with Bob Luddy, and he's going to talk about the impact of regulation on businesses and consumers. And then on November 15th at 4:30 here in the auditorium, we will have McGat Wade, and she's going to talk about better lives through business. Businesses make us better off. First thing I want to talk about is, if you haven't decided on your major, you should be an economics major. You get great jobs. It shows you're really intelligent, so I know you guys want to do that. And it's a good experience. And the nice part is, you can get a business degree and get the BS degree in economics, or you can go through arts and sciences and get the BA degree in economics and take the arts and sciences requirements. So you should consider this while when you're signing up for your classes for next semester. And also you might want to minor in entrepreneurship. It's a great thing to have a minor in. When you entered, you received a survey, and we'd like for everybody to complete these surveys. If you're here for extra credit or for the reading groups, we need to know that you're here. So make sure you fill these out to get that credit, and drop your completed surveys off in the baskets in the back of the room when you're done. If you're here for the Cardinal Flight, there's a QR code. Fill that out, or you click on it and fill out the form, and you will get the credit you need. These surveys really matter. In the past, the surveys said bring in some CEOs. So this semester, we're bringing in 3 CEOs. Hopefully, you guys will attend all 3 of them. We've got some great speakers coming in. The Center for Free Enterprise also organizes reading groups every semester. Reading groups are really nice. We read 3 books. We meet once a month, one month for each book. We go out and have dinner afterwards. It's a $200 scholarship. So it's a nice thing to do. You learn a lot, get to meet some really nice people. So you might want to consider signing up. If you're interested, on your survey, you can put your email, say, yeah, I'm interested in the reading group, and we will contact you at the end of the semester when we send out the request for next year. Next, I want to thank our partners for bringing Howard Behar in, and that would be the Forcht Center for Entrepreneurship, the McConnell Center, and the Project on Positive Leadership. And at the end of today's talk and after the question period, Ryan Quinn from the Project for Positive Leadership will have a few words to say, so please stay until he's finished. Don't get up after the questions are done, please. Finally, following this event, Howard's books will be available for sale outside the auditorium, and he will sign them for you if you want him to. So Howard Behar, human being, is retired president of Starbucks. When he started as senior executive in 1989, Starbucks had 28 stores. When he left 21 years later, Starbucks had 15,000 stores. He's written a couple of books. One is It's Not About the Coffee, Lessons on Putting People First from a Life at Starbucks. This is a book both of our reading groups read, and we had great discussions about it. So I want to welcome Howard. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we had lunch today, and then we had a meet and greet, and Howard pretty much answered all the questions I have on this sheet. So I'm going to start with the end. What's the biggest takeaway students should take from this talk?
That you have the ability to do anything you want to do. You have to learn to lead yourself first. You're the most difficult person you'll ever have to lead in your life. And if you do that well, you're going to have a fulfilling life. And if you don't, you're going to struggle. So all of us have this board of directors that sit on our shoulders, and they're yapping to us all the time. And they're trying to influence the decisions and the actions we take in our lives. Make sure that you guide them. Make sure that you're the one that influences them. And when they have something good to say, use it. When they have something bad to say, don't. So.
And so these ideas, they're really formed by people's virtues, aren't they?
Yeah.
So how important are virtues?
Well, I call them values. So I think they should drive your life. You need to know who you are. I talk about wearing one hat in your life. And I'm not talking about the hats that you wear and the roles that you play, mother, father, student, whatever. I'm talking about the hat that you wear that defines who you are as a human being. And it starts with knowing who you are. You know, each of us get formed by our environment, some genetics, some through our education, and we need to do the work of, I call it painting a picture in words of yourself. And I have a piece of paper that I didn't bring with me, but it's on my iPad in my briefcase, that has, in 50 words, Howard. And it starts with my core values, which was my first core value is honesty. And so I have to not only take honesty, it's just a word until it turns into action. Right? So I have to define what honesty means to me and how it informs the decisions and the actions I make in my life. So everything starts with who you are, what your values are, and how those values inform the decisions and the actions you make in your life. And you have to do that work, and it's not easy. You can go online, find a list of human values, about 300 words. And you have to get it, I think, down to 8 or 10, which are core values. It doesn't mean that there aren't 50 other words, or even maybe even 100 words that might define part of you. But these are the words that really define what are the most important things about you and your life. And you got to write them down. And then you have to define what each one means to you. And again, so if I went around this room and said, are you honest one by one? You probably all say to me, yes, I'm honest. But if we dug a little deeper and I said, okay, what would you tell a white lie about? There's not one person in this room that hasn't. So, right? You all agree with that? Even if you told your parents you were going someplace and you're going someplace different, right? Or you were going to be home by midnight, but you knew you actually weren't going to be home till 2, right? And you hope that. So all of us take those words and those values and they define what they mean into our lives. So it's important to write them down and then to try to live your life by them.
So in this book, you talk about that Starbucks is not in the business of serving people.
Oh.
It's not the coffee business serving people. It's the people business serving coffee.
Yeah.
So can you explain that to everybody?
Well, I don't think that there's any of us or anything that any of us will do in our lives. I don't care what major you have. I don't care what job you take. I don't care whether you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, architect, widget maker. It's always about serving other human beings. And we forget that. We think it's about the product or the service we sell. We think it's about ourselves. But everything we do in life really is to help other people have a better life. And in so doing, we help ourselves. But so when I first got to Starbucks, I pretty well was formed in terms of what I believed in terms of leadership. And I was a student of servant leadership, which was coined by a man named Robert Greenleaf. And since I was in my mid-20s, I've been studying servant leadership and trying to lead according to those values. And what I noticed was that like all entrepreneurial organizations, whether they're service business or product business, usually the CEO is focused on the product. That becomes number one. And although the product is important, what's really important are the people that work in the organization and the people that you're serving. And so I was trying to get people to believe in that. And so I coined this little phrase that we weren't in the coffee business serving people, but we were in the people business serving coffee, because I was trying to get everybody to understand that at the end of the day, we were going to do well or we were going to fail by how we treated the people in our organization, how we helped them grow as human beings, how we help them become more professional at what they're doing, and how we help them achieve their goals. And if we did that well, then they would help us. And that's pretty much what servant leadership is about at its core. If we help people get what they want out of lives and help them be better human beings and help them grow as professionals, then they're more likely to help us. And the unfortunate part in life is that many leaders think it's the opposite. They think that they're there to be served first. And if you serve them, then they're going to take care of you. And it's my belief it's the opposite of that. And so that's what I was trying to get people to think about at Starbucks. And people always ask me, what's been the key to Starbucks' success? Is it the great training programs you have? I said, no, we don't train. You train pets. You educate human beings. You educate and develop human beings. And so I always was trying to get people to understand that it really was about people. And that's what I drove. And I still drive it today. And that little phrase, I've been gone for 12 years, and I again started 33 years ago, and it's still alive and well at Starbucks today. And it's a unifying phrase within inside of a company. I never thought it would last that long. I was just trying to use it as a tool at that time to get people to understand there's a different way of thinking about our business.
In the book, you also talk about who chooses the broom. It's really about determining decision rights and responsibilities. How do you determine how much responsibility to give a worker, and what's the value of that?
Well, it's the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom. It seems like a common sense thing, right? You hire great people to come into your organization, you give them responsibility, you teach them hopefully about the greater purpose of the organization and what their responsibilities are to contribute to that organization. And then what we do is we give them the handbook. And they start reading the handbook, and in the handbook it has all these things. If they break these rules, they will no longer be here. Right? Which is the unfortunate thing, when we should be giving them all the tools that they need to do their work, and then say, choose the broom that you want. We have 5 brooms. We have a right-handed broom, we have a left-handed broom, we have a straw broom, we have a plastic broom, and we got a push broom. Pick any one of those 5 you want, and then in 2 weeks, let's talk about the broom that you chose and why you chose it and how you feel about that broom. So after 2 weeks, let's call him Jim, comes back into your office, and you can tell Jim's excited. And he wants to talk about something. And so he says, I was on the internet the other night, and I found a broom that I think could increase floor sweeping productivity by 10%. You know how many bosses say, listen, we just gave you a broom, just use the broom I gave you and shut up and do your job. When you hire people to come in your organization, you want them to try different things. You want them to make mistakes, and you want them to grow. And in so doing, they help your organization grow. And the unfortunate part is that we don't let people do their jobs. And we want them to do their jobs because they're the ones that are going to bring new energy and new creativity to your organization. Everybody know Frappuccino? Okay, so Frappuccino was one district manager's broom. Her name was Dina Campion. And she had this idea that really wasn't her idea. She had seen it at one of our competitors' store in Southern California. And she said, we need to do something like this. And she says, I think it could increase our business by 5% or 10%, I don't remember the number. And so I said, well, okay, let me take your idea back to Seattle. So I took her idea back to Seattle, and I got the usual group of suspects together, the person, the marketing executive and the product development person and a couple other people, supply chain. And I said, Dina has this idea, and I think we ought to try it. Well, we went around the room, and the head of marketing, who was in charge of product development, stepped up and he said, we're in the coffee business. We're not going to sell a product like Frappuccino. So thank Dina for her idea, but we're not going to do that. And I pressed it a little bit, but it wasn't my position. And he said, oh, do you want me to call Dina? I said, no, I'll call Dina. So I called her up and I said, Dina, you're going to be disappointed, but there's no support for this product right now. So I said, let's give it 6 months and we'll come back at it. Well, about 3 weeks later, I get a call from Dina. And remember, Dina and her broom. What was Dina in charge of? She was in charge of taking care of her own people, serving her own people first, serving our customers, and growing the business, right? That was her job. So the Frappuccino was her broom. She was a way that she thought she could grow the business and serve her customers better. So she called me up again. She said, Howard, will you come down and visit me again? And I said, Dina, what is it you want? And she said, well, I have some ideas about the beverage. There was no name for it at that time. And I have ideas. And I said, Dina, you heard the answer. Let's just give it a break. She said, no, really, will you come down again? I said, I'm not making a special trip, but I have to be in Southern California in about 3 weeks. I'll stop by. Where do you want to meet? She said, the 3rd Street Promenade store in Santa Monica, which is a big tourist destination in Santa Monica. So I show up to meet her at the appropriate time, and she said, would you go sit in the chair? And she brought up a tray with these little sample cups. Anybody ever had these sample cups at Starbucks where they're handing out samples of product? So she brought up, and I took a sip, and I said, Dina, what are you doing? Are you trying to get me fired? And she had produced this product with a store manager named Ann Ewing and a barista named Robert, who had figured out how to make a kind of a duplicate of this drink that they had at this competitor store. And Dina was one of those kind of people that I hope you all have to work with. She was like one of those little tiny dogs with really sharp teeth that sink their teeth into your calf, and no matter how much you try to get them off, they won't come off. And Dina was pressing me. Well, it's one of those times that I hope all of you will face, and you all will, that you got to make a decision. Do you go against the organization's wishes a little bit? As long as, I used to say, don't break the law, don't do anything ethical, don't do anything immoral, and don't poison anybody. As long as you can live by those rules, you're okay with me at Starbucks. So I said, okay, Dina, you want to try that? here's your rule. I added another rule. I said, don't tell a soul. And so Dina figured out how to do it. They bought the blenders, they bought the non-fat milk solids, they bought the chocolate from Ghirardelli, and they started serving frappuccinos. She thought we were going to sell about 30 drinks per store, and we had about 10 stores in Southern California at the time. Instead of 30 drinks per store, the first week it was 50 drinks a store. The second week it was 70 drinks a store. Okay, now this drink is full of ice. This is going to be high profit stuff, in case you don't know. Ice is very cheap. Milk is not. And so she's calling me every night and telling me how well she's doing. And I'm thinking, Howard, you are a genius. Because this was going to be huge. This wasn't going to be a 5 or 10%. This was going to be about a 15 to 20% lift in sales. So I brought the idea again, and I invited Dina and her co-workers up and had to bring all their supplies, and I called everybody in again. Only this time I invited the CEO, who is Howard Schultz. He just came back, and he's the CEO again, third time around. And anyway, and so I had them bring the samples in, and there were some smiles, and there were some frowns. And the guy that was the head of marketing, his name was George. I'll never forget George. And he got up out of his chair, and he came up to me, and he pointed his finger at my nose, and he said, Howard, I told you we weren't going to do this. You got to stop this now. And he looked at Howard Schultz, and he said to Howard, he said, you tell Behar to stop right now, because we're not going to do this beverage. And I had this sheet of paper with all the numbers on it. And I've been in retail my whole life. I know if something's working and you're making money and you're selling a lot of it, it never goes away. Mm-hmm. So I took that sheet of paper and I put it on my non-emotional self, slammed it down on the table, said, Howard, look at these numbers. I said, give me 90 days. If it's not working 90 days, if you just don't like the smell, we'll get rid of it. And so Dina and her broom. So Frappuccino, what do you think the total sales of Frappuccino are, including bottled beverages and what we sell in the store are today? It's almost $4 billion in sales around the world. Nice. All because of Dina and her broom. Now, there aren't very many $4 billion brooms, but there are a lot of brooms that can tweak the company just a little bit. And as a leader, you want to learn to listen to your people. You know how your parents didn't like it when you rolled your eyes at them after they're talking about something? Don't roll your eyes at the people that report to you. Listen to them. Yeah, I'm not pleading for anarchy here. You can't do everything, right? But you can listen, and you can say, well, let's think about it. Let's put it up on the board, and we'll come back with some of our people later on. Because you never know when one of the ideas is going to be a big one. But most of the ideas are small, but they move the organization forward. So that's about the person who sweeps the floor should choose the room.
Nice. Ryan had some questions he wanted me to ask you. That kind of answered one of them. But did leadership change, like the marketing guy change after this?
George was gone.
I guess he did then.
George, we should have known who George was, because when we were hiring George, and he was our first big-time marketing executive, when he went into George's office, his feet are up on his desk, and he was leaning back in his chair, and he was putting his hands like this. I'm always cautious when I see executives put their hands like this. I know they're thinking about themselves, right? And so you'd go into George's office, and there he was, like that. And George was just an interesting guy, and eventually George burned out, and he didn't make it. But it was because he didn't really listen. George was sure he had the answers. And look, leaders are not responsible for the answers. They are responsible for the questions, right? They're responsible for the questions. The answers come from you. Every answer I ever got about a problem came from baristas in a store or a store manager. And what happens to companies, when companies get in trouble, they stop listening. Starbucks is going through little problems today with the union environment heading up because they stopped listening. It wasn't everybody and everywhere, but it was in enough places that caused some issues. And so when you stop listening, right, you start to get in trouble.
Okay, so that, if you reflect back on your career, are there some examples of times when you acquired some true insights, some ideas that presented new solutions to problems that really nobody had thought of before? It's like, oh man, we should be doing this? Yeah,
it was constant. It was, Frappuccino, of course, was one of them. Another big one was, when I retired once and I came back from retirement, the week of September 11th, the guy that was the president of North America resigned abruptly. I still don't know why he did, but he did. So I was on the board of Starbucks at the time, and I got a call from Howard Schultz and Orrin Smith, who, Orrin was the president of the total company. I was president. I was retired, actually. I was just on the board. And he said, can you come back and help out for a little while? And so it'll be a few months. And I was sitting at home having a cup of coffee with my wife. It was on a Saturday morning. And I said, sure, I'll do that. My wife said, what did you disagree to? She thought we were going to go on some more vacations and travel. I said I'd go back and help out in operations for a while. Well, 2 months turned into 2 years. Well, the guy that reported to me, a guy named Jim Alling, who ended up being the CEO of Tom's Shoes. You all know Tom's Shoes probably. Anyway, when he left Starbucks. And when he was reporting to me, and I just come back, and he said to me, I think we're constricting sales because we don't have enough people in the stores, and I think we should increase labor. Well, I'm an old-time retailer. You never increase labor until you had the sales first. And so it went against my, everything I had learned or thought I knew. And I said to him, look, we had 2,000 stores at the time, so we weren't, we were big, but not that big compared to where we were by the time I totally retired. And I said, okay, you want to try it? Let's pick 300 stores, try what you want to do. So he increased labor, he gave labor dollars to every 300 of these stores, gave the store managers the responsibility for figuring out what to do with the labor dollars. So about a month or 2 months went by from the test, and it was an abject failure. All we did was increase our costs, except for 30 stores. And those 30 stores somehow increased sales significantly. So we said, what did those 30 stores do that the other 270 didn't do? And these were 30 stores that were run by people that had had experience in the quick service industry, and they understood what to do with the labor dollars. They just didn't take and add more people. They took it and figured out where the people needed to go, when they needed to be there, and they became really productive with it. And the sales went up about 5% because of it. And so we took it, what we learned, and we rolled it back out to the other 270 stores. Sure enough, up went the sales dollars. So then we rolled it out to the whole company. So I learned that you don't always know the answers. Listen to your people, and I went against what I thought was right, but I was wrong. And companies, sometimes they get too caught up. But labor is always a big line. Like at Starbucks, it's 30%. So every dollar you spend, labor is 30% of it. So when you increase labor costs, when you add more people and you increase salaries and wages, it has a significant effect on how you run your business. Pricing has got to go up, other things have to come down or whatever. But he was right. So it's endless. I had a guy that reported to me, I'll tell you his name because it's in the book. His name was Dan Hurdle. And this is when I came back. And he was the head of strategy when I came back. Dan Hurdle was he was brilliant. But he was one of those kinds of people that needed high touch every day. He was in my office every day, wanted to talk about something, and so people had struggled with Dan, but I didn't because he was smart and I wanted different people. And that means you got to be able to put up with people that need more attention, to people that don't need any attention, people that are blonde, people that are brunettes, people that blue eye. Everybody's different. And in leadership positions, you got to learn to be able to deal with all kinds of people. It's very difficult sometimes for leaders to do that. So Dan he wanted to be in operations. He wanted to get out of strategy. He wanted a line job. So we weren't doing very well in food and beverage, in the food side of our business. It was about maybe 8% of our sales at the time, and we knew that we had to increase that to grow our business because people like food with their coffee. So I said to Dan, Dan, I'd like you to take this line position on the food side of our business. You're going to be in charge of all food. And he didn't want to do it because he thought, I want to be in operations. I want to run store. I said, Dan, this is a big job. I need you to do that. So I got all my other direct reports to convince him that he should take the job. And he did. And Dan was a difficult guy to work with. He could break a lot of glass along the way. And so I kept getting he had direct reports, and his direct reports would come to me and say, I can't stand working with him. Right? He's just too hard to get along with. And so I went to Dan. I said, Dan, can I talk to your people? Because I always believe you got to do that first. You don't go behind a leader's back. And so I went and talked to his people. And I said, what are the issues? And they said, well, I said, is Dan making a difference? Yeah, he's really smart, but he hurts my feelings all the time. Because, if I'm not doing something fast enough, he's always on me. So I said to him, do you think we could change Dan? And I went to Dan again, I said, and to his people, and I said, here's what I'd like you to do. When Dan hurts your feeling, I want you to have a code word with Dan. Because Dan was actually cared about people. He didn't know he was doing the things he was doing. He just wasn't in tune with it. I always say he was only dealt 50 cards in a 52-card deck. and it was the people cards that he was missing, that empathy card. And so I said, every time Dan hurts your feelings, I want you to mumble the code word to Dan, so he hears it. And so slowly but surely we got Dan to turn, because he was hearing enough code words that he knew that he had to change. And Dan was the guy that created breakfast sandwiches in the store, significantly changed the business. And he was the one that put ovens in our stores, which was a big battle royal to get them in. But he was a smart guy, and he learned to be more in tune with the people. But you got to be willing to put up with different people, because everybody's different. Not everybody's the same. Some people are anxiety carriers. Some people give other people anxiety. Some people absorb all the, and you got to figure out how to deal with all kinds of people. Not mean, destructive people, but even those people might have some value if you learn to turn them. But he was one of those kind of people, and he did a remarkable job. But interestingly enough, when I retired the next time, he reported to somebody else who couldn't deal with it. Just couldn't deal with Dan's personality.
So values are really important. And building trust, you talk about it in the book, and trust is probably one of the most important things. How do you deal with naysayers and stop the poisonous environment that happens? It happens in every business, I think.
Yeah. Trust is not trust is not just an important thing. It is the only thing that matters in life. If you think about, let's just take it to you. You got friends. Each of you has a friend. If you don't trust that friend, are you going to be friends very long? Are you going to have a relationship? If your parents don't trust each other, are they going to be married very long? Right? If you don't trust your parents and your parents don't trust you, can you really have a productive family? You can't, can you? If you go to work in an organization and there's no trust between you and the people that you report to, can you have a respectful relationship with that person? No. Trust is everything. Trust makes the world go round. Without it, nothing works. Nothing works. If you think about our country today, the only thing what's lacking is trust. It isn't that we disagree with each other, it is that we don't trust each other in the journey. We think the person that disagrees with me is wrong. We don't trust that they care. Right? They all care. You may all be different political stripes. The issue is not whether or not you agree or disagree with each other, it's that you don't trust each other. And that's what's killing us. So trust, to me, is everything. So, repeat the question.
Like in the business store, you get this poisonous environment.
Yeah.
You get that, we were talking about this earlier, certain percentage.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that?
Well, let's decide what the poisonous environment is. So at Starbucks, people mattered. That was what mattered. You could miss your numbers 3 years in a row, but if you messed with the people, we were going to have a serious conversation. And so you couldn't keep your job if you messed with the people. We would work with you, but if you couldn't get there, you shouldn't be there. And any time we failed, it was because we didn't spot it early enough. Well, we had a leader that just really didn't care about his or her people. So if you get that kind of leader, I don't care what their numbers are, I don't care how good their results are, they can't stay. So I have this theory about organizations that, and whether I'm right or not, I don't know, but you'll decide. So there's 10 to 20% of the people in any organization that no matter what the CEO does or what their boss does, they're perfect. The boss is perfect. They could have their hand in the cash register taking money out and putting it in their pocket. They could be having an affair with their administrative assistant on videotape. And you'd say, no, they didn't do that. And that's 10 to 20% of the people that they will never blame their CEO. The CEO or whoever it is, the leader is perfect. And you think about politics, we have that, don't we? Then there's 10 to 20% of the people that no matter what the CEO does, you could put If you had kids and you put them all through Harvard, if you bought each of you a new house, if you gave each of you a 100% raise tomorrow, you'd say, what's that guy up to? Right? He's not a good guy, he's a bad guy. And then there's the 60 to 80% of the people in the middle that float around. And they're attached, they gravitate one way or the other. And see, the issue is everybody thinks, well, if I could just get rid of the naysayers, everything would be good in the company. The problem is you need the naysayers. The most dangerous people are not the naysayers, are not the distrustful ones. The most dangerous people are the ones that only see the absolute pure good in the leadership. They never question, they never add value in the questioning. And the issue is you don't want the people on that bottom, or I don't want to call it bottom, but that dark 20%, you try to turn them into being productive. Now sometimes they just can't be. They're destructive. Those people can't stay. But people that are always saying, hey, this is wrong or this is wrong, you just need to figure out how to make them productive. Right? And remember, again, not bad people that destroy other people, but these are people that are constantly questioning the status quo, constantly questioning authority. Figure out how to make them productive and include them in the process. They'll move your organizations forward because they have a lot of influence in the organization. And so, you don't want to keep destructive people in your organization, but you do want to keep people that disagree because they're the ones that move you forward. I mean, if not Dina Campion pushing me, if she didn't push me and I didn't take a risk, if I just said I'm going to play by the rules, George didn't want it, I'm not going to do it, there'd have been no Frappuccino. So it's as simple as that.
So I've got 3 more questions I want to ask in the next 7 minutes. What percentage of companies follow a similar management style as Starbucks, putting people first? And can every firm do this? And can every firm find workers that fit that kind of style, or is there a mixed bag?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think if you ask me what percentage, I have no idea. I tend to be, I focus on the ones that do it, and the ones that aren't doing it, I try to get them to think differently, but it's hard. It's hard to get leaders who are autocratic to think differently. It's very difficult. They're slow to change, and when they change, they're slow to change, And so it's hard to do. But I know a lot of companies. Costco, one great one. The Container Store, another one. Nordstrom, another one. Salesforce.com, Lyft. I mean, there's tons of them that are good. And there's tons of them that have been bad. Wells Fargo has suffered greatly because of leadership. Tyco was one that was really bad. Uber, terrible CEO. WeWork, terrible CEO. And amazingly enough, the CEO of WeWork, he was terrible. And he just raised another $380 million from venture capital. It told me everything about the venture capital company that gave him the money. It was about the money, that's all. And I think that we can change. Look, I've been a student of servant leadership for over 50 years. And I started out as an unconscious competent. I was doing it, but I didn't understand what I was doing. It was part of my makeup. It was part of my family of origin stuff. Smiley face, cared about people, because I had parents that cared about people. They understood that they wanted to serve people, and so I learned it from them. But I didn't know what I was doing, and then I got introduced to the term servant leadership by one of my mentors, and gave me this little orange booklet by Robert Greenleaf, The Leader is Servant. And that began my journey, and I wanted to become a conscious competent. It meant that I understand what I was doing and I could teach it. That's what conscious competency means. And so I've been a student for all those years, and I'm still learning about servant leadership. But there are just some people that just can't do it, and that they can't get there. But a lot of people want to be. I'll tell you that it works. I've seen autocratic styles, and I've seen servant leadership styles. Now, I've seen autocratic styles that have been successful. So servant leadership is not about a leadership model. It's about a life model. It's about who you are as a person and what matters to you and how you treat other people. Servant leadership, if you're a servant leadership, it isn't going to guarantee your company's going to be successful, you're going to be rich. It's a values model. And you got to want to do that stuff, not because of the money, but because it's the right thing to do to treat people well. You're not kind to your wife because you think that she's going to cook you, or a husband because you think they're going to cook you a really nice dinner. You're caring and loving about them because you love them and you want them to be cared about and feel cared about. It's not because of what you get, it's because of what you give. And so servant leadership is about giving. And you gotta be in agreement with that, and there's just a lot of people that can't get there. I'll give you some examples in my neighborhood. Microsoft. Everybody looks at Microsoft, and they've been a great company and done incredible things. But Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer weren't exactly kind, gentle guys. They were abusive. They were abusive to their teams, and if somebody came in with an idea that they thought was dumb, they'd tell them that they were dumb and get the hell out of their office. Now, do you think that helps people be motivated? What does it do? If you came into my office and I said, that's the stupidest damn idea I've ever heard of, get out of my office. I don't have time for that stupidity. How would you feel about yourself?
Not very good.
You wouldn't, would you? So, and that's how they operated. And because Bill, wasn't that they're bad human beings, it's not my point, right? But it's where Bill kind of came from, and where Steve Ballmer came from. And they made a lot of mistakes, and they slowly but surely sucked the life out of Microsoft until it was 10 or 15 years with their stock flat because they weren't producing. So Ballmer leaves first, right? And he made a bunch of mistakes. He wasted billions on buying companies that didn't work. Then Gates leaves, and for some reasons that we won't talk about, but Gates leaves, and they put in I forget the guy's name, Sasha something, I think. I don't know. Anybody know?
Satya Nadella.
Yeah, huh?
Satya Nadella.
Yeah. Anyway, so he comes in. Now he's been working at Microsoft for a lot of years, and working in his own organization. And he changes the psyche and the culture of the organization to be people-centric. And he says the single most important skill a leader has to have is empathy. And now everybody wants to go to work for Microsoft. Look at their stock, look at their results. That was about the change. The rest of it was just stuff, And so I'll tell you that it works, and it's a way. I just believe in it, and I think that it works. And all of you, are going to be different. Some of you in this room need autocratic leaders. You feel better about yourself when somebody yells at you. Okay, then go to that kind of company. I'm not saying you have to. You don't have to work in a servant-led company. But you should work in a place that at least reflects your values. None of them are victims. When all of you that are in school, when you graduate, you are not a victim in the kind of company you choose to work for. You need to do the same kind of work that you did in choosing your major and choosing where you went to school as you do choosing your employer. Do the work to find out what kind of organization it is. What's their mission statement? Do they have a values statement? And then talk to people that work there. Do they live up to their values? Every company has a gap between its mission and its values. And what they do. Every company. There are no companies that are totally have closed that gap, right, between who they say they are and who they are. So find out. Ask the question, what happens when you make a mistake in this company? Find out what happens. What happens when you do something well in this company? And find that out. Ask those questions before you go to work anyplace. Don't just take a job because you're going to be unhappy. You don't want to go home every night and say, God, I hate this place. Now, the unfortunate thing is many times, even at Starbucks, the company was pretty good, but there are people that got into the company that were leaders that weren't so good. So you always want to watch out for that. Always try to find out who you're going to report to. And try to talk to them first, or at least ask people about that person. Do your research. Do your work. Just like you do a research paper, do your work.
Wow, you answered my next question, which was how would students figure that out so that they have. So I've got one really short question, and then we'll have student questions. Starbucks just hired back Howard Schultz, right?
Yeah.
When are you going back?
I'm not going back.
Okay.
I don't want to go back to work and report to Howard Schultz again. I did that for 21 years.
Yeah.
And I disagreed with bringing him back. I mean, it was no choice because there was some issues, and they didn't have anybody else. But shame on the board for not being ready. They should have had people in a line to be ready for that. When you got to bring a CEO back 3 times, something's wrong. You know? So.
Okay, so questions are open for students. If you have any questions, go up to the microphones and please ask.
So number one, here are the rules of this game. There are no rules. Okay, there's nothing you're going to ask me. It's going to hurt my feelings or embarrass me. Yeah, I don't care what the question is. There are no dumb questions, and there's no question that's too personal for me. So go for it.
I'm a post-baccalaureate student, and I've had the privilege of working for some individuals who headed big companies. And so as somebody who has lived through that, so much of what you said is great wisdom, and now I know why, in large part, Starbucks was so successful. But my question I want to ask you is, to make it really relevant for the students here, Lucy Helm was your general counsel, and she was a graduate of the University of Louisville and a friend of mine. Did you hire her?
No, Lucy was general counsel, but she'd been an attorney on the team, and then she became promoted to general counsel. But then she took over human resources, and she gave up her general counsel job, and she became one of the best human resource leaders we ever had. And she's coming here to accept an award. Yeah. She's a fantastic person. If you get to meet her, do it. She's great.
Did you hire her?
No, I didn't hire her. I don't know who hired her. But like attracts like, and the person who hired her was probably similar to Lucy.
So she's going to be Alumni of the Year for the University of Louisville. So she'll be in for homecoming.
So does Alumni of the Year means you got to bring a big check, or do you get to...
You're next in line.
Thank you. I don't want to be. I'm not an alumni.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm kind of interested in Dina's story about what happened to her after she got the Frappuccino adapted, and where she was before and what happened after that.
Yeah, Dina Campion. She just retired last year, and she became, I forget what the title of the job is, but she became the funnel for all new products or services. So she had a team of people that would take everything that was coming in from people or from the marketplace and funnel down, because you end up having to focus on things. As much as you may want to do everything everybody says, you can't. So you pick the ones that you think add the most value or are going to help the company or help the people, whatever it is you're trying to do. And she ran the organization that was the funnel for that. She got a big check when Frappuccino came up, and she was like partner of the year or something like that. She should have asked for a piece of the action, a percentage of Frappuccino sales, but she didn't.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Earlier when we were talking, chit-chatting, you said that you started in sales. How did you move from a salesman to a CEO of Starbucks?
Well, I was a salesman probably when I was 5 years old, trying to convince my parents to do something for me. So I grew up in retail. By the way, you're looking at a guy that barely got out of high school, a couple years of community college, so I couldn't even carry most of your briefcases. But I grew up in a family that was service-oriented, that my dad had a small mom-and-pop grocery store in the north end of Seattle by the University of Washington. And, he opened the store before the Depression. He was an immigrant, and classic immigrant story. He saved his money and opened up a little store, right? Because that's how he made a living. And, his customers were his neighbors and his friends. And he taught me about the value of serving others. And he taught me about the value of displaying well to sell things. And then my brother and my brother-in-law both owned furniture stores. So I went to work for them when I was probably about 13 years old, delivering furniture and dusting furniture. And every once in a while I'd get on the sales floor. So I grew up in sales. I grew up selling things. But we're all selling things. We're either selling ourselves, we're selling an idea. The most difficult customer is us. Selling something to us when there's a risk in front of us and we're afraid, and we got to sell ourselves that the risk is worthwhile. But I grew up in sales, but I really grew up in people. And so I got my first management job, managed a furniture store, not in the family, with somebody else when I was 21 years old. And that really began what I would call my formal leadership journey. And I just progressed, and I took jobs other people wouldn't take. I always said I'm the best at picking up cigarette butts there is. And because I believe that you got to be willing to bend over if you're going to move forward in life. And so it was progression. And everywhere I went, I was lucky. I had somebody that put his arm around or her arm around my shoulders and taught me skills. and taught me things. And I had one single mentor that changed my life, a guy named Jim Jensen, who is alive today but seriously ill right now. And he was the one that introduced me to servant leadership. He was the one that taught me that I could do anything I wanted to do. He was the one that taught me to set goals in life, because he was always saying to me, Howard, if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. And he taught me to believe in myself and to develop the skills, and he taught me about affirmations, that affirmations could change me. And he actually, I give him the credit. He was the one that really changed Howard Behar and got me to think differently than I was thinking. Unfortunately, he came along relatively early. And so it was just a series of experiences. Do jobs that other people might not take because you think you're going to learn something. And then learn something. Ask for help. Find people that can help you. It's not always somebody that you report to. Sometimes it's your coworker that can be your mentor. In my case, sometimes it's my grandchildren. They taught me, when putting paper in a recycle was all, I was too old, But my grandchildren, when I'd throw something in the wrong container, they always tell me, Grandpa, you put that in the wrong container, so anybody can be a mentor to you.
Hi, my name is Molly Spicer. I'm a freshman business student. In this world of climate change and fair trade, how can you, in a large company like Starbucks, find a balance between maxing out profits and ethical sustainability?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that the goal should be to maximize profit, first of all. It's to optimize. And there's a big difference. When you maximize, you're willing to do anything to get more profit. When you optimize, you look at all the trade-offs you're going to make and how those trade-offs affect other human beings. So let's take fair trade coffee. Starbucks was never a buyer of cheap coffee. And we were always buying at the top of the scale in terms of quality of coffee. And we were one of the first to, we were, I don't know if we still are, the largest purchaser of fair trade coffee in the world. But we started our own organization called Cafe Practices, which really stood for working with the farmers to help them make a living. Because if you think about it, quality coffee is not an endless supply. It's always in a short supply. So the coffee growers had to make money, and the people that were working on the farms had to make a living, or it wasn't going to work for Starbucks. So we focused on that. And were we perfect about it? No. But it's just like wages and benefits. We were the first company in quick service industry to give health care benefits to everybody, part-time workers. If you work 20 hours a week or more, you got it. We were the first company to give everybody equity in the company. If you're a barista, you work 20 hours a week or more, you got equity. And on and on and on and on. And then we made some mistakes in this COVID cycle of not listening, and it cost us, and costing us now. But look, at the end of the day, we serve a lot of constituents, and everybody has to be served to some extent. And sometimes it gets out of balance, right? And you got to figure out how to deal with that. But no, it's the goal is not to maximize. It just is not. There's no inherent conflict between taking care of people and making profit. That's just fiction. You can make an adequate profit and take care of people all at the same time. But some people get in this either-or philosophy, and it's just not. It's just not true. Starbucks has been a very profitable company all through the years. Great cash flow. We never had any debt until very recently, and for different reasons. We don't need to have any, or they don't need to have any debt, but for another reason they took on some debt. But we always have made good money. But we always paid more than minimum wage. We always gave people benefits, and it's never been about the money, and Howard Schultz is disappointed with the union thing. It's not about money for him. It's not about paying people more. It's not about that at all. He's disappointed because he feels somehow he failed the people. And the people see Starbucks as not caring about its people, which he lives or breathes by that. So, it's been the way all the way, and I hope that it never changes, because if it does, there'll be no more Starbucks.
Hi there. So you talked in your speech about ensuring that our individual values adhere to the values of the business that we're working for. And so in America, over the past 10 to 15 years, we've seen companies, including Starbucks, take increasingly strong political stances. So how should workers respond when the company they work for don't take stances that go against their political ideologies?
Well, if you're Disney, you're probably asking that question in spades. right now. It's always difficult. My personal feeling about it, stand up for the things that you believe in. Leaders have to stand up for their people. If you don't, then who are you? Right? You got to be willing to take the abuse. And in today's political climate, unfortunately, there can be a lot of abuse on both sides, by the way. It's not conservative or liberal. On both sides, you get hammered. And Starbucks has taken positions. We are the first company in our industry, particularly, to give same-sex benefits to partners. The unions didn't want it in Seattle. The Teamsters Union was against it. They didn't have it. And we said we're going to do it because we thought it was the right thing to do. Now, not everybody agreed with it. Probably a lot of, maybe people in this room don't agree with it. But, we did the things that were right for our people. There were shareholders that thought that we shouldn't spend the money giving health care benefits to young people that were part-time workers. But never once in a board meeting that I was at did that subject come up, should we get rid of health care benefits? And when some shareholders pushed too hard, we said, sell your shares. Buy another stock. One of the great things, there was a guy named, one of the founders of Costco, Jim Senegal, one of my all-time favorite leaders in the world. And he got constant pressure about pay structures and about how he treated his people. And he just said, sell your stock. Now, in order to say that, you got to produce. Right? You got to achieve your goals. You got to produce. You don't get to do that when you're not turning in the results. So you got to produce to be able to say it.
I have one more question, then Ryan Quinn has something he wants to say.
Hey, so what's the hardest decision you've ever had to make as CEO of Starbucks?
First of all, I was never CEO, so let's get that straight.
So whatever position you were, what's the hardest decision you've ever had to make?
Letting somebody go. The night before, I could never sleep. Even when I knew it was the right thing, and even when it was somebody that had to go for reasons that were significant. It was always difficult because I knew I was going to affect their lives, and no matter what it was. And when it was kind of in the middle, but I knew they had to go, that was the worst. And so it was always that. And I made lots of mistakes, on both sides, keeping somebody too long, letting somebody go too quickly. But, at the end of the day, leaders are paid to make those decisions, and sometimes you got to make them even when you're uncomfortable. But that was always the most difficult decision. I always believe you need to love the people going out of the company as much as you loved them coming in. And they always had to be seen as a whole human being when they left, even if they were dishonest. Even if they had done something really wrong, you had to love them going out because they are a human being and worthy of your love.
All right, Ryan?
So at the Project on Positive Leadership, one of the things that we do is, because our mission is to increase positive leadership in the world, we try to honor acts of positive leadership. And we want to honor an act of positive leadership that Howard Behar performed. And this one, for those of you who've either read his book or are planning to get it, you'll see it on pages 100 and 101 of the book. But we actually did a little bit more research on this one, and so we actually called some of the people involved with this story to learn a little bit more about it. So this is a surprise to Howard. Totally. And so for those of you who don't know, the story is that prior to Starbucks, he worked at a company called Thousand Trails, which was kind of a resort campground business. And the business kind of grew ahead of itself a little bit, and they ended up having to lay people off. And that's hard in any situation, as he just talked about, in terms of firing people. But this is, a small company growing quickly. You know everybody, you're friends with everybody. And then to make matters worse, somebody left a list of the people who were supposed to be fired on the photocopier. And someone found it, and the list got out, and the rumors started flying. And the senior leadership started wondering, do we try to smother this? Do we ignore it? What do we do? How do we handle this situation? And there was a woman by the name of Lori Christmas.
Oh my God, did you talk to Lori?
We did talk to Lori. And so Lori was, I believe, the executive assistant.
She was my assistant.
Yeah, and she said, nothing sounds like the truth but the truth. And at that point, Howard listened and said, all right, we're going to tell the truth. And so they had an all-hands meeting, and told everybody exactly what the plan was, what had happened, apologized for the mistake that had occurred. And of course, there was still pain and difficulty and whatever else, but people saw the good faith act of honesty and then chose to follow. And in the project on positive leadership, we define positive leadership as beginning with an extraordinary act of some virtue, such as honesty or courage or compassion or whatever it may be, that others choose to follow because they're inspired by that act. In this case, you saw that following from the people in the organization because this was exceptional honesty, but it was also exceptional humility. Not every CEO listens to their executive assistant when they tell them, no, step up and be honest, boss. And so we wanted to acknowledge that so that we can move forward. And in fact, Lori Christmas told us a couple other things as well. One thing she said is, I closed the conversation, she said, the best thing about Howard is he never stops trying to become a better person. And the reason we think that's important, you'll notice we didn't say, we want to honor Howard for being a positive leader. We said we want to honor an act of positive leadership. Because when we talk about people as positive leaders, people often stop learning. They think, now I'm a leader, whatever I do is going to be positive. It discourages other people who think, well, I guess if I'm not a positive leader, there's nothing I can do about it. But when we say we're focusing on acts of positive leadership, then anybody can say, all right, what can I do to be exceptional in this situation? And so we want to offer this award to Howard.
You know something? This is the most incredible award I've ever had in my life.
And in fact, the other thing that Lori said is she said, Ryan, I don't know if you're a hugger, but if you are, will you give Howard a hug for me? So here we go. Thank you.
When she said those words, Howard, only the truth sounds like the truth, I'm thinking, yeah, easy for you to say. And it was one of the most valuable learning experiences I ever had in my life in terms of leadership. And you never get in trouble for telling the truth. I mean, real trouble. People might not like you for a while. Maybe they'll even leave you, right? But the truth matters.
You can look yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, you can go home at night and say, okay, I did the right thing.
Yeah. I do see one. Do you want to ask a question? We can do one more.
Okay.
You talked about the truth, so I think you were there when the Supersonics left Seattle. I thought that would be interesting. I just want to hear if you know the true story, because I lived there during that time for 3 or 4 years, and it was never really clear to the community what actually happened.
Well, Supersonics was our basketball team. So Howard Schultz and a group owned the basketball team, owned the Supersonics. And when he bought the team, I was quoted in the Seattle newspaper saying nothing good will come. I think he's nuts, nothing good will come from him. That was the exact quote. He's nuts, nothing good will come of this. And because I thought when you start to get mixed sports with a retail organization, it all bleeds over. If you're not winning championships or something goes wrong with the players. And Howard thought he was going to win a championship in 2 years. That's really what he thought.
We have Kevin Garnett. They had Kevin back then, Durant.
Yeah. Remember Gary Payton? Anybody remember Gary Payton?
The glove.
So, and Howard and Gary Payton got in a like this, hated each other, and Howard got fed up with it and said, "I want out," because they were starting to use more capital, and so Howard says that he didn't know that Oklahoma was going to move the team. I know he knew. Right, I know he knew, but he wanted to sell the team, and they never put in writing, I'm not going to move the team. But within a year, less than a year, they moved the team. And people in Seattle have hated Howard. He can't go to a public sports event, period. And I'm sure even when they'll bring a team back, and he will never show up at the arena because he's not going to. People, he did what he had to do for himself. It cost him a couple $2 billion, to tell you the truth, because Steve Ballmer was a bidder on the Sonics. And something happened in their negotiations, it fell apart. And then Howard sold it to a group from Oklahoma. And then a few years later, Steve Ballmer pays $2 billion for the Clippers, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's all I know. I don't, I wasn't on the inside of that deal, so I don't know all the other things that took place, but nothing good came from it.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Howard for coming today, and thank you guys for coming also, but thanks very much.